Have you ever been in a group where everyone is talking at once, and you realize you've said almost nothing? But somehow, you know exactly what everyone is thinking? You're nodding, smiling at the right moments, maybe even finishing people's sentences in your head. Someone eventually turns to you and says, "You're so quiet," like it's a diagnosis. And you think, "Quiet? I've been busy." If that sounds familiar, maybe it's you, maybe someone you know. There's a deeper psychology behind why some people observe far more than they speak. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because observing more than speaking isn't just about being shy. It's not simply introversion, or a lack of confidence, or having nothing to say. In many cases, it's a highly active mental stance, a way of moving through the world with your eyes open, your antennae up, quietly collecting information while everyone else is busy filling the air with noise. Let's unpack the minds of people who watch first and talk later, and what's really going on beneath the silence. There's a type of observer who treats every room like a living documentary. Picture this. You walk into a cafe with friends. While others are choosing seats and joking about the menu, this person is already noticing who sits where, who leans in when they talk, who interrupts whom, and who keeps glancing at their phone when a certain name comes up. They don't jump into the conversation right away. They're calibrating. Psychologically, this comes from high social attunement. Their brain is wired to scan patterns before participating. Speaking too early feels like commenting on a movie before understanding the plot. These people often grew up in environments where paying attention mattered, where reading the room was safer or more useful than dominating it. So, they learned to gather context first. If this is you, you might find that when you do speak, people listen. Not because you're louder, but because your words land with precision. Ever notice how you rarely regret what you say, but often regret not saying something sooner? That's the trade-off. Then there's another profile, the internal processor. You know them by the pause. Ask them a question, and there's a beat, sometimes a long one. In a fast-paced conversation, that pause can feel awkward, like dead air begging to be filled. So someone else jumps in. Meanwhile, the internal processor is still assembling their thoughts, making sure the response feels true, accurate, and complete. This kind of observer values coherence over speed. Their psychology leans toward depth rather than immediacy. Speaking isn't just a reflex, it's a commitment. They're aware that once words are out, they can't be pulled back. So they think, and think some more. If you're like this, you might replay conversations later, realizing exactly what you would have said. Perfectly phrased, unfortunately, 2 hours too late. It's not that you lack opinions, it's that you respect them enough not to throw them out half-formed. Another kind of quiet observer is shaped by emotional sensitivity. Imagine someone at a family gathering. On the surface, it's casual conversation. Underneath, though, they're picking up on subtle tensions, old grudges, unspoken disappointments, fragile egos. They notice how one joke lands wrong, how someone's smile fades just a little too quickly. Speaking in these moments feels risky, like touching a bruise you're not sure everyone acknowledges exists. For these people, observation is a form of self-protection. They've learned that words can escalate things, even unintentionally. Silence, on the other hand, keeps the emotional temperature manageable. If this resonates, you might often feel like the emotional regulator in the room, absorbing the undercurrents so others don't have to. The cost? You can end up feeling invisible, as if your role is to understand everyone else while remaining largely unseen yourself. Then there's a quieter rebellion at play in some observers. These are the people who simply don't feel the urge to perform. In a culture that rewards constant expression, opinions, updates, reactions, they opt out. Not dramatically, just quietly. They listen, they watch, and they speak only when it feels meaningful to them. Small talk feels like static. Forced enthusiasm feels dishonest. Psychologically, this reflects a strong internal locus of meaning. Their sense of self isn't built through external validation or conversational dominance. They don't need to narrate their presence to feel real. If this is you, you might notice that silence doesn't feel empty. It feels spacious. And when you do speak, it's often to say something that shifts the conversation, even slightly. You're not trying to be interesting. You're trying to be sincere. But here's the twist. Observing more than speaking isn't always a choice. For some, it began as a strategy. Maybe they were talked over as kids. Maybe they learned early that being outspoken led to critics.